that tops most of the banks and large companies in the industry. So we're sort of driven in that regard. But I'm looking forward to the panel with Carl and I guess Sister Yinka, moderated by Mr. Asuni on the topic. But there are two or three things that resonate for me in terms of where we are as, globally, really, on digital disruption. One is the efficiencies that it creates in terms of delivery of products and services to our clients. Because when you make life easier for clients, then you build loyalty. Loyalty translates to sales, and sales means more business and more clients. So it's a positive self-fulfilling prophecy. The second one is the internal efficiencies, and again, I think this has been sort of amplified and by the recent pandemic. Work from home and how digital disruptions are also making it easier for our staff, and I'm sure the staff of most of the companies here, to be able to be more productive. So that's something as well. Dr. Thomas Ifashino, my colleague, will talk more about what Ecobank is doing in terms of digital disruption, but one that I'm particularly proud of, beyond the typical products and services that most banks provide, whether money transfers and payments and so on, is what we are doing even beyond the shores of Nigeria. Being the largest Pan-African bank with 35 footprints in 35 countries, we are the key partner to the Africa Continental Free Trade area in PAPS, which is the Payment Systems Platform. And for us, that's very, very important. And it's not just about trade, but also about the ability to move money seamlessly across Africa. So thank you very much for asking us to host BC and WCD team. We're very pleased, we're delighted, and I'm excited, and I look forward to a very insightful discourse in a few minutes. Thank you very much. I give this to Ladi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll just get on the stage. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the people that are here physically, as well as the people that we have online. Without further ado, I'll just welcome the discussants. I'll start with Professor Olayinka David West. She's an Associate Dean and a Professor of Information Systems at Lagos Business School. And she's someone that is very passionate about digital transformation. She lent her voice to digital transformation, top subjects of financial inclusion, as well as technology adoption. Welcome. Second, thank you. Second discussant could be Carl Toriola. This is spoken about him. He's the CEO of MTN Nigeria Communications Limited. Carl has decades of experience in the communications industry, and he has served in various leadership roles across different communication companies, both in Nigeria and outside of Nigeria. Welcome. Okay, I'll just take a seat. So welcome Yinka and Carl, and thanks for accepting to have this conversation. So this morning, as the chair has shared, and BC, we really just want to explore the subject of digital in a bit more detail to help our directors here understand how they can be more proactive on the subject of digital, understand what the digital context is. I want us to really do a lot of demystification of the subject. It's somewhat a buzzword in the industry today, but I think it's important that we all get a baseline understanding. And secondly, we then want to look at what's that journey about digital disruption or transformation as an organization. How can board members be more proactive? What sort of questions should board members be asking? So firstly, and I'll start with you, Yinka, when we talk about digital disruption, what's exactly do we mean? We hear digital disruption. Some people talk about digitalization. Some people talk about digitization or even digital transformation. What really are we talking about when we talk about this subject?
Okay, good morning, and thank you, Ladi, and WCD, thank you for the invitation. and the honor. You know, this is something that confuses a lot of people when we talk about digital. Before it was ICT and, you know, just different buzzwords. So what I try and do is, in the world we live in today, disruption is a journey and it's not an endpoint. First of all. Second is we have three key terms that we use: digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. And we use them interchangeably, but I think they mean different things. First of all, digitization is about taking physical products and converting them or transforming them into a digital version. So how many of you have taken all your old photographs and sort of put them on a drive, your music, and so you're digitizing that, you're preserving that, you're creating, they're just creating artifacts. The second stage is now the digitalization, which more is about the business side and taking your business processes, your business activities, and you're automating them to ensure that there's productivity and efficiencies, information flows and sharing. And that also is enabling businesses to do better, so you're not carrying files and papers around the place. And again, we're saving the planet. So that's the digitalization. But when we come to transformation, I think transformation is a bit broader, and it involves everything. But transformation is also about transforming entities. So you're transforming an organization. You're transforming the people in the organization to have a digital-first mindset, to think digital, to use digital, to enable themselves and be productive digitally. So that transformation takes a while because you have to think about it at different layers within the organization. There's the individual. And don't forget that our technology, as good as it is, if you don't press enter, nothing happens on your computer. So you can have the best computer in the world, but if you don't use it, so there's that socio-technical interaction that we need to create with technology. And unfortunately, again, is that a lot of us are very agnostic towards technology. We believe that there's some geeks in the back room, right? And that's their job. And that mentality came from the era of data processing, right? When technology wasn't ubiquitous. You'll submit your job, you'll wait 24 hours, you'll get it back. So even a lot of the time, a lot of us called our technology departments data processing. But again, as microcomputing came in, there's computers in our pockets. There's computers on our hands. We're wearing wearables, right? So how are we using all this and enabling ourselves? And basically, the power is now within the individual. So when we talk about transformation, transformation has to be all-encompassing, holistic, the individual, the team, the department, the workforce, the organization, and even the nation. Because when you look at it from a macroeconomic perspective today, a lot of countries are competing on digital. So it's not a business issue only, but it's a national issue, and we'll continue to use the different technologies, and there are many, to basically transform and change the way we do things, the way we live. Thank you.
Thank you, Yinka. Carl, so on the subject of disruption, right? Obviously, there's a lot that has been happening, even accelerated in recent times by the pandemic. In your opinion, what would you say are the major drivers of the digital evolution that we're experiencing in the world today?
Okay, first let me confess, I feel slightly intimidated after hearing Professor David West. And I'm thinking, how am I going to sound intelligent on this stage? Let me promptly dispel the myth that because you hold the position of a CEO of a large company, you actually know a lot. The truth is you figure a lot as you go along, and you rely on a lot of people around you. Look, the transformation of our society is happening, and it is driven by a few things. The evolution of technology, microcomputing, things becoming smaller and smaller, the evolution of connectivity, and be very clear on this part, the behavior of the youth, who are much quicker to adopt technology. But probably the big underlying reason behind this transformation is the incessant quest for increased productivity, whether it is corporate or government, private or public sector. And this cycle has happened in so many ways over many, many years. The industrialization age, in some way, that was started by Henry Ford, moved people from being artisans working into their home into a big factory line and improved productivity as a consequence. And as you move computing capabilities and connectivity Probably in some ways the reverse is happening, where people can be productive by moving back to their homes, eliminating commute times, all the issues you have around managing the home affairs. So the quest for productivity is essentially going to drive new solutions, new business models, new ways of being productive, new ways of accelerating change. And today, it is about digitization, but a part of digitization that's actually going to take increasing prominence is artificial intelligence and robotics as well. So that's a journey that we're embarking in. Let me be very sincere. I mean, as someone who works for MTN, you would think that we have a 100% clear roadmap of where this is going to go. We are jumping on every technology bandwagon. 5G is one of them. And in many instances, we get on the bandwagon first and then we figure out how to use it after. So it's not a perfect solution. When we started rolling out 3G in the telecoms industry, aside from surfing the internet, there weren't that many use cases until smartphones came along, but we still rolled it out. So it's a question of, if you build those technological capabilities, there are people, tons of people, much smarter than me, and usually much younger than me, that figure out how to use these kind of technologies. But it's a journey, as Professor David West said, and we figure it out as we go along.
All right, thank you. You sort of preempted the next area of the conversation that I wanted to go into, which is then looking at the technologies. When people talk about digital, obviously, the underlying capability that is enabling digital is technology-driven, and sometimes, people are, a bit lost on what those details are. You've talked about artificial intelligence, you've mentioned robotics. In more recent times, we've heard metaverse, augmented reality, drone technologies, Web 3.0, and the list goes on. It's almost infinite. I'm going to pose this question to both of you. If we're to just take a peek into the future, or even looking at today, what would you say are the most transformational or likely to transform the way we do things? What are those technologies that you perceive, we should be on the lookout for, being the ones that would likely have the greatest impact on the way we do business today?
So I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record. I think I've used this story 3-4 times, and I did an interview which will probably be out in the press in a week or so. So I'm going to use this example. This is a story I read, and I have to find where I got the article from so I can refer to it properly, where a few students in Stanford University developed an app that can use the camera of a smartphone, standard smartphone, to take a picture of a skin melanoma, or I'm not sure medical practitioners here, and was more accurate in diagnosing it than the combination of the top 10 dermatologists in the USA. So the knowledge that we've been pumped into our heads, and I think most of us here went through the classical education, you must study this, you must cram it, you must understand the theory, etc. A lot of that is effectively becoming obsolete because artificial intelligence and very cheap computing tools are replacing those knowledges and skills that we built over time. So artificial intelligence is going to make a lot of what we do obsolete. It's going to be so great that you can just throw a bunch of muddled up numbers into some computing system and it will bring you a clean book of accounts with 1 or 2 judgment calls that a chartered accountant would have to make. And so a chartered accountant that goes through the pains, a fellow chartered accountant goes through the pains of those books for months and years, and you know how year-end closing is, from 1st of January till 31st of January, you are working till 4 a.m. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence will generate everything. There will be probably 2 judgment calls that you can make, and all your skills that you've developed over the years are almost obsolete. And it will be the same for law, and it will be the same for engineering outside of innovative new developments. So that's one part of the disruption that I think is going to be significant and going to have a huge impact on the labor market. The speed at which it happens, I don't know. Robotics is going to be huge because there's a lot of labor-intensive work that's going to be replaced by robotics and allow economies that normally will go and produce in places like, I don't know, Botswana and Vietnam to do it in their home countries cheaper than cheap labor exists, so can be very disruptive to geopolitics across the world. The robotics, I don't know how long it's going to take to develop to that extent, but you know how it is. It's like the hockey stick takes some time and all of a sudden takes off. And underpinning all of this, fortunately for me, so I can pay my monthly bills, will be a lot of connectivity with very, very low latency. I think those are the three spaces, but there's so many ways lifestyles are going to change. I don't want to preempt too many questions, so I don't make you redundant already.
Thank you. Thank you. Yinka, I'd like to get your perspective. I mean, outside of the technologies, AI, robotics, connectivity, which Carla has already mentioned, what other technologies? And another important twist I would like to, or important perspective I'd like to get from you is that when a lot of these technologies are mentioned, sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle to relate it to the end consumer, given the reality of Nigeria. A lot of digital always seems to target, can be a bit elitist, if you will. It's targeting the app user, it's targeting the person that has access to internet. What are your perspectives about those more inclusive technologies that would change?
Okay, thank you. Let me just build an addendum to Carl. There's a video I show in my classes. It's called Humans Need Not Apply. And it's on YouTube. And it's an interesting one because if you think about the horses that used to deliver mail in the good old days, where are they now? They're in Central Park doing tourist work, right? And so that's really the evolution and the journey we're going on. So we need to all realize that at some point in time we have to embrace it because it is going to happen. Technology will always be cheaper, faster, and basically economics always wins in general. So when we think about things like deliveries, drones are already doing them. And then I think we need to also sort of maybe take it up a notch to the whole fourth industrial revolution movement, because digital is just one of those pillars. So when we look at the digital pillars, when we look at the biological pillars and the medical areas, and then also the autonomous and the physical devices. So I think in San Francisco the other day, Cruise launched a self-driving Uber. So the bottom line is it's all about technology, it's data, artificial intelligence. And those are the pivotal ones. So emerging key technologies for Africa and emerging markets would differ in depending on the region. But in African emerging markets, data is critical because data also fuels artificial intelligence because the machines need to learn. Okay, and I would love a machine that can learn the things I do so I can sleep a little bit more. Ladi, we spoke about this earlier. And then the other one is blockchain. And why blockchain is important is, so when you think about the double ledger that you accountants, Antonio, you're an accountant, so you look at your double ledger, that's what the blockchain is going to do. So when you think about having to reconcile, balance accounts, that's already going to be done. Another beautiful thing about the blockchain is because it is democratized, it's not in the hands of any one user. So when you think about your bank, you have a central system and then you have everybody access it. But imagine a blockchain which is decentralized, distributed, and basically within the protocols that you've put in, who can update it and who can access it. So that kind of system is available. And what it does is that it helps us, and this is going back to the social impact. How do you send money from Lagos to Namibia? To send $100, Pan-African Bank, right? How do we do it cheap and fast? If somebody is working, a migrant worker is working somewhere and he needs to send $100, it might cost him up to $40 to send that money. That's already eaten into it. So the World Bank has a policy or a guideline where how do we break down these costs? Technology is there, but again, the intermediaries are also there. And those interchange costs. So how do we use technology that we can sort of break down the costs? And that's where blockchain comes in. So blockchain systems are trying to enable things like remittances, things like global IDs, and things like that. Another area is, and Carl, I said I was going to put you on the spot here, is what we're seeing in our markets when we talk about access to finance, which is an area that I'm definitely passionate about. And we think about the USSD as a channel. Because, I don't know how many of you noticed that a lot of people can't afford data. People like Carl sell YouTube bundles, 20 naira data bundles, etc. And still, people turn off their data at certain times of the day and turn it back on. So in the financial services system, how do we ensure that transactions can go on seamlessly, remote, rural areas where you don't even have 1G or 2G or something or the other? USSD has been our lifesaver. But then again, there's a bit of a spat now, right? In terms of who's paying for the USSD. Is it the consumer? Is it the telco? Is it the bank? But whether we like it or not, the infrastructure needs to work, and it needs to work reliably. Another risk that we also face, and I'll put this on the table now, is the talent flight. And it's affecting all of us more than we think now, because a lot of the applications we're using today are failing. And they're failing not because they don't work, but things happen, bugs happen. Then again, from a board perspective, did we follow due process when we were building and deploying those apps? Because if all the knowledge is in the head of one person, and that one person walks, he's walking with your business. And so your business is now going to have to start again and repair. And I think it was Mr. Adeshola when she spoke in terms of enhancing customer value, being more convenience, ensuring that you can deliver good products and services to customers. Those customers are already used to eating, let's say, for example, Quaker Oats, and then you now tell them to downgrade to PAP. And that's really what we're going to begin to see happen. So we need to start to strengthen our systems, strengthen our people, strengthen our knowledge bases and our documentation as well. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. Just to let the audience know, both our physical audience as well as the online, we're going to be taking questions at the end of the panel. So please get your questions ready. For our online participants, feel free to post your questions in the chat. Okay. Carl, I'm coming back to you. When we talk about opportunities for digital, I think because in the room as well as online, we have directors from different industries, and a lot of times when we talk about digital, there always seems to be some bias to certain industries. I would like you to share your perspective on the sort of digital disruption that you're seeing in, industries, perhaps in telecoms, outside of telecoms.
So, you will know that Professor West is really digital because she's holding an iPad and I'm taking notes on it. I was just noticing myself. Let's go back in history. If you walk around big Western cities, you will see that some of the biggest real estate, which may be getting a bit aged now, used to belong to telecoms companies. So you see BT, huge buildings. You've seen it less and less now because they're selling it off. Swisscom, NTT, Docomo, etc., etc. There was a golden age, 70s and 80s, where the mass of the value that was created in the telecoms industry specifically was taken by the telecoms operators, and also telecoms vendors like Siemens at the time, Nokia, Ericsson, etc., etc. The infrastructure for the connectivity is actually taking the lowest part of the value in the ICT industry now today. That is why you've seen companies like Nortel that have basically collapsed. Nokia Networks survived by combining with Siemens. Ericsson hasn't had a great share price journey, etc. And if you look at the telcos themselves, the operators, and you go to the West, you will see that for the top 5 telcos, and I haven't checked the statistic recently, it might be wrong now, but about a year ago, they had lost 40% of the market share, of their market cap over the last 5 years. So it's a very, very, very difficult industry that's been transformed primarily by the OTT players. And people that are riding on the infrastructure, as the telcos continue to invest in that infrastructure, they're taking the majority of the value out. We end up squeezing the vendors, who are also declining, and everyone else, including fintechs. And I'll come to the issue that was raised is taking a majority of the value in the industry. And one of the big reasons for this is the massive capital investment that you need just to remain on steady state in the telco. So we will invest nothing less than $500 million a year in MTN Nigeria. That is just capital investment that just keeps going, keeps burning. So the disruption is happening by OTT players on the telecoms industry. It is happening by fintechs on the banks. Telcos are trying to do it to the banks themselves, and it is something that's guaranteed to continue to happen. And it's not restricted to one industry. Industries are now crossing themselves to go and disrupt in every way possible. In fact, the big Google, that is an information source and one of the biggest companies in the world today, is being disrupted because the majority of the younger ones are doing their searches now on TikTok. So it's just inevitable. I've spoken about the telecoms industry as an example, but apologies, I don't want to sound defensive, but I still do work for MTN, and I've been in this industry for 27 years. Every time a USSD channel is occupied by a banking service or any other service, our radio network capacity is being occupied. And we dedicate on 2G 8% of our network capacity for signaling, which is primarily USSD and call setup signaling, some of it for our own purposes like recharge, some of it for banks. And the financial industry keeps complaining about these charges. And I say to them, if you are occupying that capacity, just like if I access your capital, there's a cost to doing so. And they will say, you guys are fleecing. I say, well, listen, go and get an operating license and go and get spectrum and build your own network if you think it's that easy. And when they look at the return on invested capital, they won't try it because they have to pump capital in and the returns aren't that brilliant. The next thing I hear from the financial services industry is, well, we only want to pay for successful USSD transactions. If they're not successful, we don't want to pay for them. I said, that's fine, as long as you are ready to offer loans to businesses and only charge interest for the ones that succeed, then we will try and encourage doing the same. But trust me, the nature of law and the search for productivity will eliminate those problems over time. So this whole discussion around financial inclusion and the cost of financial inclusion, specifically on USSD, is eventually going to disappear, but just by the law of economics, which you say always wins. But disruption is massive. It is guaranteed to happen in every single industry. I see our CEO from Flutterwave, the unicorn of Nigeria there. In a few years, somebody's going to be trying to disrupt them. And the best thing you can do to protect against that is to build the right culture in your organization with governance. Professor Olayinka spoke about one person having the application in their head, with the governance to make yourself sustainable and resilient and not to bend on single-man risks. But if you have the right culture, you will be able to innovate and transform your company to capture new opportunities and defend your market space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Professor, when we spoke earlier, you seem to have a bit of different opinion on the subject of disruption, questioning whether indeed there's disruption or whether really what we should be talking about is transformation. But then the reality is that disruption happens, whether we like it or not. There are certain businesses that used to exist that no longer exist because there are digital alternatives or people that have been able to innovate their way into providing services in a different or more effective way. Now, as we go into the discussion of how organizations should then embark on this journey, or how organizations can be more proactive about self-disrupting or transforming, what really are the possible pathways for that journey?
Okay, thank you. And I think the first thing is everyone's pathway is different because we all have different starting points and we all have different end goals in general of who we want to be as an organization. So there's no cookie cutter approach to this thing. I think sometimes disruption from a definitional perspective means that you obliterate somebody and you take the person out. And I go back to Amazon, who is one of the biggest disruptors. But to a certain degree, the bookstores are still there. They're still doing what they're doing. And yeah, Amazon is eating in and things with the marketplace. But it's still going on. But let's go back to why do we need to disrupt? And I think Carl started it. Consumer behaviors are changing. There's new ways of doing things. So it's really about how do we offer a new proposition to the consumers that we want to work with. And if you think about Nigeria as a market today, with a mean age of 18, and then what you have to ask yourself is, how do I interact with that 18-year-old? How do I build a business for that 18-year-old? Because that 18-year-old today, and I think this was one of Obasanjo's philosophies about SMEs and students and things, that you're investing in the future value, not in the present day value as you see. So when we think about it, how do we begin to think around disruption as an organization? One of the biggest constraints, I will put that on the table now, is the capital investment required. Because first of all, when we talk about innovation cultures, you really need a separate team, ring fence a separate team, have a different organization that's thinking about the future and looking into that crystal ball to try and understand what will our consumers look like in 20 years. Then what I like to think of is the cartoons, right? Jetsons versus Flintstones. So when you looked at George Jetson many years ago, right? He was flying around in these cars, but we're doing that today. So if you can begin to think around what will that be like? So I'm hoping that Antoinka was asking for tea when she got here. You get a pill and that's your tea, and it would metabolize in your body and that's going to be your tea. But that's really what we need to start thinking about. They might seem ridiculous today, but I don't think anything is ridiculous as we evolve into wherever we're going to. There's the metaverse, right? I think MTN is the only company I know that has invested in property in the metaverse. The other day I was on, it's a competition in banking technology and finance in India. And I'm waiting for Auntie Fatima to sit down. So, and it was a banking technology competition, and one of the products was a bank in the metaverse. And yes, you might think, who is going to go and use metaverse? But again, 5 years, 10 years, but Carl said it, you don't start then, you start now. Because you start with the building blocks, you start with a small investment, and then by the time you grow, you've developed the capacity, you've developed the expertise, and you can now launch a product. So what I would think is, for me, it's about, I worked in R&D in one of my roles. It was almost like putting a child in a toy box and saying, just go and play and decide on what you want to create, right? But just continue creating different things and testing out different ideas. So we need to have that open innovation mindset. Nothing is a stupid idea. We need to think about what you are not thinking about because you have a different demographic, right? What will that demographic look like and how will they work with the systems? You need to think about the culture. You know, we need to be a bit more vulnerable to throw out the norm and also think about embracing new things. Now, you're thinking about me writing with the iPad. Normally, I'm a notebook person, but I'm trying to convert myself because someone needs to make that step, okay? So I have a digital notebook as well, that with digital paper, then I can convert it, you know, so I have all the different bits and pieces. So we need to be agile. What happened yesterday won't always happen tomorrow. And that goes back to what I said earlier, a digital-first mindset. Yes, I know I can do this by paper, but how else can I do it digitally? And how do we force ourselves through that transformation and that change? Organization-wise, we need to look at our cultures, because culture is one of our biggest stumbling blocks, because we believe that, oh, that's how we've always done it, it's worked before, and so why do we need to change what we need to do? But I'm not saying you change. Well, you do need to change, because you're also looking at aligning with the customers you're serving. And the minute an organization stops aligning with the customers they're serving, they're creating an opportunity for a new market. It's out of stock. I'm hungry, I go to a store, I want to buy Indomie. If Indomie is not there, I will buy what I see. I might never go back to buying Indomie again. And so we're all in that market because whether you like it or not, it's the flutter waves that will take your work. If in the financial services, in the medical services, there's the remote medicine and telemedicine options and things like that. So the whole idea is that every sector is being disrupted. So for me, the first thing is we need to engage more. We need to also look at cross-sectoral applications, because what is happening in one sector might not necessarily happen in your sector, but it could be applied in your sector. So when we think about robotic process automation, for example, a lot of us think about factories and just moving logistics things, but then again, in some organizations or some entities and things, you have robots that are making food. You have robots that are doing your housekeeping activities and things like that. So there are different applications, but it's about learning. I think one of the things we need to do more is read and learn. It's just read and learn and just be curious about what's going on in different markets. We need to test out things. Test and learn is another thing. Nothing will work the first time. So it's like riding a bicycle again, and I think that's the analogy. We're going to continue riding bicycles for the rest of our lives. You take off the trainer wheels, you put them back on, you take them off, you put them back on, because every technology has its own different path and its own different journey. And then also just don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fall down. You know, you'll have bruises all over, but you know what? You'll come out stronger because you know what your organization can also tolerate. And sometimes you don't know. So a lot of us have invested in technology, thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread, but then again, it just doesn't stick. And so you have a lot of technology and everybody's just looking at it, user interface, and this, and all sorts of excuses. But I'll say something in just my final word is that technology always works because it's instructions. But the whole idea is that it's the people that we now have to build in, and change management is something that we need to think about. Why should they do it? What's in it for them? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. And Yinka's touched on a number of important as well as sensitive topics. And, you know, as a consultant, every time we speak to clients, especially when you're talking about digital transformation, when you're talking about innovation, like you rightly said, failing, there's a bit of paradigm shift that needs to happen. And I imagine that for most of us as board members or directors, the big question is always, you know, where has this been done before? Where has this been done successfully before? So there seems to be that innate caution around trying new things. So Carl, if I may ask you, what sort of paradigm shift do we as directors need to have in embracing this new reality of failing, experimenting, innovating, trying things for the first time, possibility of not getting that return on an investment just because things did not really work out the way it was anticipated? What would be your thoughts on this?
Okay, first, if I may just introduce our Acting Chief Digital Officer, Aisha Umar Mumuni from MTN. Thank you for joining. And my auntie, Momiwa. I'm in trouble now. Welcome. Look, it's a very difficult thing to do. First of all, the people who are here are subject matter experts because they've done well over 10,000 hours of the same thing, which has led them to success. To discard those 10, 20, 30,000 hours of knowledge on and a way to do things that has proven to be successful and change them completely is extremely difficult, I would say near impossible. When you layer on top of that the incessant search by corporates for growth, every year they want 10% more profit after tax, 10% more dividend, etc., etc. The ability to say, this year, forget dividends. Okay? I'm going to pump in 20 billion, 40 billion naira into try and innovate in a new space, and if it doesn't work, so be it, we move on. It's extremely difficult when you're working for a listed, I will answer that question. I will answer that question. It's extremely difficult when you're working for a listed organization that has expectations and demands, and you have all these governance requirements, you have a risk committee chair, you have an audit committee chair that has to ask questions if what you're doing is making sense and what if it. So most organizations actually fail. And the biggest killer to that kind of innovation is the culture of the organization. Like I said, MTN has gone through massive success, rolling out networks. We've gone through a famous fine. We have become so conservative when it comes to governance and compliance. And you want to change that behavior and think people are going to experiment and push things to the limit. It won't happen inside MTN. You have to first have a physically different office. You have to have a physically different compensation structure. You have to have different kind of directors that are probably more youthful than me, myself. Okay, so I'm talking that you need directors that are like 38 years old. You understand? To change that way of thinking, and if you try and do it within MTN itself, it will stifle it. The culture is a living organization that lives to protect itself. It has established itself, and if you try and change it, it will murder everything that tries to come and disrupt it. So it's extremely difficult, and in some ways, that's probably why one-man businesses can succeed more at those kind of transformations, because one man can take the risk, call the shot, he's only accountable to himself, disrupt, smash his existing business, etc. So what you want to do is you want to keep your traditional business running, you want to optimize your cost structure, your efficiency, and continue to protect and grow your market share to fund the ability to go and experiment elsewhere. And to answer your question directly, MTN can do it. MTN has done it. It's always extremely heavy lifting to do it. But let me tell you why mobile money is successful in many markets. We're just starting here in Nigeria. First of all, we have the customer relationships. They're mobile phone customers with some KYC. Second, we have a distribution structure. But one thing that's not spoken much about is MTN. In every one of the countries where we have very large mobile money ecosystems, as large as Safaricom, Ghana, Uganda, Rwanda, etc., we have funded those businesses probably for 10 years, and it has eaten into our margins for 10 years for us to build up that ecosystem. And you may not see it on the surface, but the financial capabilities to spend, I don't know what the number is, it depends on each country. If it's Nigeria, 40 billion naira or 30 billion, whatever the number is, every year building the distribution structure for 6 years before you see any sign of profitability is one of the unique things that MTN has and has been able to do it. But it's difficult. It is very difficult, I must say so.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We will be transitioning to the Q questions and answers segment in about 5 minutes. So this will probably be the last set of questions from me. Yinka, an important takeaway for the directors from this session is then giving perspectives on what sort of questions, what sort of perspectives, do they need to have to manage and help the organizations that they oversee to make this digital transformation journey a successful and sustainable one while navigating the potential pitfalls and challenges.
So thank you. Let me first put my biases on the table. I'm an IT person. I love IT. But technology cannot solve all problems. And I think that's the first thing I would say. When a lot of people are looking for this custom-built solution, the analogy I use is you go to a dressmaker, I want a custom-built dress. She could get it. She could not get it. So there was one day I was talking to Nika Ogunlesi, and we're talking about alterations with clothes. And she said one day she had a customer and they wanted to buy a waistcoat. So they asked the store attendant, do you do alterations? And the store attendant said yes. So the waistcoats they had were like from size 8 upwards. But the child they wanted to buy a waistcoat for was 18 months. So they bought the waistcoat and said, okay, do an alteration. So at what point does it stop being an alteration and become a new build? And that's one of the biggest mistakes we make with technology. We buy something off the shelf and we say, go and rebuild it to suit my organization. And when it doesn't work, we wonder why. So what is the proportion of the change that we're desiring? Is that change easier to do by adjusting our organization, or is it by building? Or can we live with 70% rather than trying to get to 100? And those are the types of decisions you're going to have to make every day. But unfortunately, my colleagues in IT are eternal optimists. It will work, man. You know, and I don't have a problem with the optimism. But you see, I can only be optimistic about what I can control. I deploy a system to a branch. Let me use the banking analogy. It might not work. One of my earlier days was before when I used to do systems, signature verification systems, and this was as far back as SGBN. And we deployed a new product. I had done the testing. It worked. We deployed it. They said it's not working. So basically, I said to my boss, okay, release me for a week. Let me go to the branches, and I will go back and do the work. And the problem was the system was working. The snag was that we asked them, because of the new storage technology, go and rescan all your signature cards. That was where it was not working, because they did not want to rescan. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many routes to failure, and the failure routes are really human. But in terms of decisions, we need to be mindful that technology is not a magic bullet. And I think once you accept that, then you also manage your expectations. When technology people talk, they tell you about the features and functions of the product. But you're not a product business. You're a solutions business, right? How is it solving a customer problem? How is it addressing a business problem? And that's what you should ask. What problem is it solving? How is it going to solve this problem? Because whether you buy FlexCube, T24, ERP, SAP, whatever, it's a black box, right? Does it do what you want it to do for your business, for your customers? And that's what you should focus on, not really the product. For me, technically, they all do the same thing. Buy iPad, buy Samsung, you will get the same features. The usability is now your own personal preference. There's some people that if you give them an iPad, they won't know what to do. There's some people you give them a Samsung, they won't know what to do. So it's all that user preference. But so for me, it's ask and so what? That's the question that I love asking, because it doesn't cost you anything. And so what? So what if we don't? Right? Will the world stop? Okay? Ask yourself that, what are the risks? What's the likelihood of success? What's the likelihood of failure? Because sometimes we only see the linear path. We also need to ask, where are the landmines? Because there are landmines. Another thing I like to ask is, what's the total cost of ownership? Because sometimes we sneak in the acquisition as the first bite, right? And then you now come and say, but we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. And especially now as we're interfacing with more and more systems and layers, what are the changes that we need to do? And sort of look at the full picture. How long will it take us to reintegrate everybody back into this system, et cetera, et cetera? And then can we test? You're looking very nervous.
She's agreeing with you. Okay, thank you very much, Yinka. Carl, earlier on you talked about the need to create a separate organization for that agility in order not to stifle innovation. I think the final question from me to you before we take the audience questions would then be, how do you hope to achieve this separation while still carrying the main organization along? Because that's always been a dilemma, that there's this new separate organization, different culture, younger people, And then you then have to start dealing with how then do we transform the organization itself? How can the board members still help the main organization achieve its potential when it comes to digital transformation?
So interestingly, MTN is going through that exact process now in our Vision 2025. And that has a few pillars. One of them is ESG, but another one is transforming us into a platform business, focusing on digital, fintech, while maintaining our connectivity business and continuing to want to take the majority of the market share in that space. How do you do it? It is, when I say in real time, it is what we're exactly battling with now. In our last quarterly CEO meeting, we had a special session to talk about it, but that tells you that it is difficult. I think to succeed, there has to be a shared reward in your core traditional business as a result of the transformation, but you probably have to have a separate board for each of these entities that act quite independently. The closer you try to govern those new entities that are innovative using the old structure, the more likely you are to populate the new structure with the exact old behaviors they're trying to get away from. But the truth is, the old structure will need things like customer information, billing systems, distribution systems, etc., for the new innovative business to thrive. And subconsciously, your own staff can sabotage it. So it requires, firstly, a lot of communication. And I can't remember where I read, when you think you're communicating too much, you're probably just about to start communicating adequately. Second, and part of that communication is for people to understand the value created by this transformation. And then you have to connect that to the value creation of the staffs and individuals in the entire organization, which is where share option schemes, which, I mean, we do have them in Nigeria, but I think in the USA, for example, people think of compensation first in that structure before you talk about your annual or monthly salary, are good. And if you can narrate a story of MTN Nigeria PLC today is trading at 200 Naira, traditional telco multiples are 5 times. You split that into 4 or 5 businesses, fintech trades at 20 times, infrastructure businesses trade at 11 times, digital businesses probably more like 15 to 20 times. It can translate into a shared value, sum of the parts, which is 1,000 Naira per share. And so each of you shares can become, if we go through this process and execute properly, go from 200 Naira to 1,000 Naira, and then people start to buy into an idea. But maybe in terms of milestones in doing that transformation, aside from the share price, which people can feel is very distant, you actually set up some specific compensation structures for the traditional organization to achieve certain milestones, and then you put those milestones in their KPIs as well. It's a journey, and MTN itself is figuring it out. I think we're making very good progress, but there's no magic wand or no silver bullet to it.
All right, thanks, and I like the way you've closed. Right now, we're going to be transitioning to the Q&A from the audience. I'm enjoying the discussion so much. I wish I could continue to hold the mic, but I have to yield it at this point. Yes, please. Can we have a mic for the audience? So just as we wait for the mic, we're going to alternate between the people that are here physically as well as our online. So we'll do one of each. We have just about 30 minutes for this segment. The mic, please.
Thank you. And this has been so exhilarating, very exciting. I have 3 questions, but very quick. When you were talking about disruption, I didn't hear you talk about cloud computing. For board members, we hear a lot about, we're told cloud computing was the solution. Now it opens us up to so many risks, cyber risks. So if you could just share a few perspectives around that. then I'd like Carl to please demystify the whole notion of 5G. You know, what exactly is 5G and how does it make my life better? You know, somebody said it causes COVID. Is that, is that true? And finally, where do you draw the line between embracing digital transformation, which is inevitable, and the realities of a country like Nigeria? So if you take robotics, for instance, definitionally, robotics will mean you use less people, fewer people. Unemployment in Nigeria is about 33%, without counting underemployment. So are you going to embrace digitalization, robotics, because that's the way to go, at the risk of worsening unemployment that's already at a catastrophic level? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just split the question between Yinka and Carl. So Yinka, I'd like you to speak on the cloud as well as the risk. Because of time, let's keep the responses very brief.
Okay.
And then let Carl talk.
I think cloud is not the solution. It's a solution to your CAPEX, OPEX. So you're renting rather than investing in your own solutions, but the same problems still exist. So whether you want to move it in the cloud, which is again a nice answer, because when you think about, you know, powering somewhere 24 hours with diesel at 800 naira, why don't you make that somebody else's problem? So you don't really have to keep your data center up and active and things like that. But I think that with cloud, you still need your risk management. You still need to understand what your challenges are, because the thing about data risk and data theft is that, honestly speaking, nobody is immune. So whether it's ransomware today, if the US government can also be hacked and be infiltrated, I think it's just about how are we learning, how are we understanding, what are the risks, what are vulnerabilities, and you continue monitoring those vulnerabilities. So that's really how I look at cloud. But then again, it has its own advantages, and we've been using cloud from the days of Yahoo on Gmail, but we just didn't call it cloud in that sense. So we're vested in cloud, but it's now about how do we protect and ring fence our cloud to ensure that our customers' data is safe. We don't run foul of the Data Protection Act, whether it's NDPR or GDPR or anything like that. So we're in that race. So it's about understanding, engaging, and continuing to improve the security systems. And also the risk with cybersecurity is people. Do people even understand that there's risks with, oh, I get a funny email, a Santa is dancing, and they press it, and basically you've infiltrated the whole network. In our homes as well, because we're using the same devices across networks, right? So we just need to be aware of those things. Free, juice jacking, you know, we see a charging port, oh, I connect my device to it. You can be jacked. So just understanding that, you know, there's nothing free in this world, and you just need to keep your radars on and your antennas up and protect yourself in that way. Your camera on your computer, people can eavesdrop, they can cyber spoof you and things like that. So just read, engage, and protect yourselves. Number two is this issue about digital transformation realities for Nigeria. I think one thing we need to be mindful of is that there are many technologies and the use cases differ. So not all use cases are mainstream or universal. So we have to realize that if it's robotics, it makes sense in a factory rather than putting people. But again, there's also new opportunities in the platform workspace to actually remove technological unemployment and deal with technological unemployment. So when you think about YouTube, there are many influencers on YouTube today monetizing their content, right? When you think about Fiverr and Upwork, there are many people who are working remotely and they're doing micro work, micro tasks, activities, and things like that. So it's really the shift. And I think I've done some research work on this. It's not just about having those opportunities. As businesses here, are we also rethinking how we look at work? Because typically you're employing somebody to an 8-hour contract for 30-day pay, etc. But you might not need a project manager for 6 months or on your payroll forever. Why don't I hire the project manager for the project? And so a lot of organizations here, to absorb that unemployment capacity, we might also need to change the way we think about work, so we can actually put people to work in different tasks and activities rather than just keeping them on payroll. So there are models that are evolving now, but it's about, is it a decent livelihood? Is it decent work? Is there fair pay? Is there fair benefits, etc.? And that's work that we're doing at the business school at the moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carl. On the subject of 5G.
I'll try to be very quick on cloud. What cloud has also done is reduce the barriers to entry. So a business that will need $500,000 to start up because they have to buy servers, etc., I don't know what it is, $4,000 a month, they can buy that computing capacity. So that means there are a whole lot more people that can compete with you. That's one thing I think you have to be a little bit conscious around cloud computing. 5G is just another wireless technology. There is what we call Ericsson Zero Site right in front of my house. It's a sort of billboard, lamppost billboard solution. Doesn't have 5G yet, but we're upgrading it. I studied radio optimization strategies. I wouldn't put a site right in front of my house if I had any fear of any radiation or COVID, etc. So, frankly, you probably get more radiation from your laptop screen than you do from a 5G network. What is 5G? It is ultra fast internet with ultra low latency. We tested over 2 gigabits per second. On our launch, which was a live network, we achieved over 1 gigabits per second, which is 50 times the speed of your average 4G connections. And what does that do for you? It allows you to progress in terms of the immersive internet. So that's the metaverse. You want to try on, with artificial intelligence, you want to try on, see which of your outfits work for you today. At some point in time, you have programmed every single outfit that you have into your home computing system, and you wake up in the morning, you press this, it will display you as you're standing without outfit on, and you can select this bag, you see yourself, no, I've nailed it today, and then you can go out, you know, and the immersive internet, virtual reality, augmented gaming, etc., and then the industrial internet, which is all about robotics, etc., etc., and it's going to bring ultra high-speed internet in the first instance to the homes of people, with really good quality connectivity. We launched with 200 sites. By the end of the year, we'll be at around 3 times that across the country. By next year, we're going to accelerate, so you'll have really good quality and penetration and coverage across the country. So I'm not beating my chest too much about it, but by next year, I will be. But it's going to be another step of transformation for Nigeria. Just quickly on the unemployment versus robotics, automation issue. If we don't get it right, those jobs are going to move to robots elsewhere. We can be as defensive as we want, and we will say we want to keep this type of employment in Nigeria. Economics will always win, and it wins faster in a connected world where people, first of all, are connected through technology, can travel a lot easier. Japa is about a connected world. You don't have the right economy to sustain the youth of Nigeria, they're going to move. So there's no way to defend against it. If we're not competitive as a country for the labor market, the money that invests in whatever labor that we do, barring some subsistence, is going to move elsewhere. And we'll be forced to, at some point in time or the other, to figure that out and get it right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Carl. And if I can just add to the discourse on cloud, I think an important thing that we should also note as board members is that usually when we talk about cloud, lowering the barrier of entry for startups, I think for bigger organizations that are embarking on a cloud journey, in our experience, where it also sort of blows up or causes problems is the scale. Sometimes just trying to move years or huge tons of data or workloads right from your on-premise to cloud without consideration for what should stay, what should go, how can we adopt this as an incremental journey. You know, that also easily causes, you know, huge costs that raises questions about, is cloud indeed offering a better solution for businesses? So that's another thing that we need to think about. The journey to cloud has to be one that is backed by the appropriate strategies so that it doesn't become a huge cost for the organization. We'll take a question from one of our online participants. I'm taking the one from Mrs. Adebajo, Pedro Adebajo, and she's asked, I know, Carl, you've talked about board culture and composition before now, so I'll just ask if you can spend 2 minutes to just perhaps recap or give any additional perspective. The question goes, how can the board culture, composition, skill set help prepare for digital transformation or disruption in terms of age, gender, skills, even ethnicity, as the case may be? Can you just touch on that quickly?
So the de facto digital expert on our board is Dr. Mobola Johnson. So that sort of says it all. You get the right person with the right background and experience, and she's a PhD in the space of technology, former Minister of Telecommunications, etc. And she's very active in many, many spaces, NUTM, startups, etc. So she's very current with what's going on in the technology and digital world today. And I think we increasingly need more people like that on our board. And the diversity allows you to understand many, many perspectives about how the behavior of your customers is changing. Inevitably, across the world, but more so in emerging markets, the female gender has been in some ways repressed from their full potential. But because they've been repressed, that's exactly where the maximum of the growth is going to come from in terms of your customer base, your spending power, etc., etc. So if you don't understand those customers, what their needs are, what are you solving for them, you can't provide solutions that are going to create value for the business. And then, of course, the truth is, even for people look at me and think I'm a technical expert because I lead MTN and because I was CTO 11 years ago. I don't half understand the behavior of the youth today. My daughter is a graduate, so I'm not as young as I might look. Maybe I'm flattering myself. But it's hard if you don't have youthful people as part of the organization. And I'm starting to think so on your board itself to really bring those perspectives to your board to understand how behavior, how business models, how the everyday life, how the gig economy in terms of working is playing out in the world. And you can read a lot about it, but when you meet people face to face in person, you get a lot different perspectives. So it's critical that we get that diversity in every aspect of the business on the boards, and it's critical we have people that understand technology. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just add that I think what Carl said is you need someone that can demystify the technology to colleagues on the board. Because I think a lot of the time, a lot of board members are sort of trepidating what the technology people are saying. And I think also about, just challenging what management is bringing forward, because management has already gone through their own iterations and they bring you their own solutions or their own decisions or recommendations for your approval. But how do you challenge that? How do you get different perspectives? So I think sometimes talking to other board members and just engaging around this conversation of digital, because like we said, it's not a magic bullet, it's not a cookie cutter, but different experiences play out across different scenarios. So it's just engaging, talking, not being afraid to learn and listen, but demystify, because sometimes we come at it with all the gigs and all the gags and all the terminology, and we assume that everybody should get what we're saying. So please don't be upset by it. It's just our nature. We don't communicate very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl, there's a question for the physical audience. Pardon me, I'll take one more from the online because this is linked to what you just shared, Carl. What do you as a member of executive management find useful from your board? What kinds of questions or perspectives help you to make decisions around digital transformation for your company? And this is coming from Dr. Bello Sage, the co-chair for WCD.
I think the first part is they bring a lot of a broader view. I'm spending 12 hours a day working in MTN, and as much as I'd like to read articles, news, etc., and follow what's going on in the world, this time doesn't just afford it. And there are a lot of things that are going on in the global space and in the Nigerian space, which they bring to your attention and your highlight. A good understanding of key regulatory evolution. And because we have quite a number of people that are seasoned in the public sector as well as the private sector, they can highlight things that are risks or opportunities that are coming. And really, it's just a different way of thinking. If you have an army of Carl clones running MTN, the company will be dead in 1 year. So that diversity of thought, and trust me, my board, they challenge me. They are no rubber stampers. Yesterday, I had a governance committee meeting, and I was taken to shreds over something we didn't do, which a competitor did. So continuously being challenged, continuously bringing global and local perspectives that you are not aware of. A different approach to thinking about things really keeps the leadership of the organization, not just myself, but the entire executive committee and the rest of the organization thinking about how we're doing things. And I mean, in MTN, with all humility, I think I feel we're just not doing enough. There's just so many opportunities that we're missing. We're not fast enough. And everybody sees the fantastic financial results, and I'm just like, we missed so much. We can do better. You know, and having that mindset and culture actually helps you to continue to improve yourself.
Thank you. Can we have another question from the audience here? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Adenike Adeyemi. I'm the Executive Director for Faith Foundation. I would like to shift the questions from for-profit to non-profit boards, because I know there are quite a lot of us here who sit on boards focused on social impact and social innovation. And some of the conversations we've had are around the role of digital disruption and innovation in solving some of the issues we have, so like unemployment, financial inclusion, and the like. But a lot of non-profit boards even have less risk appetite for the investment or even the resources with R&D, or the resources for time for innovation. So my question is, what's the guidance that our panelists will give to non-profit boards in the value proposition for investing in innovation that will help them deepen their impact and scale their reach? Bearing in mind that even they may not, because of sometimes the source of funding, cannot afford also to fail in the examples that we've given. So what's the guidance? What are the KPIs that they should look at in ensuring that their strategy has that innovation focus? How do they measure success? How do they learn from failure? And how does that also tie into the achievement of social impact while being accountable? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll direct that to Yinka. I think this sits right in your alley.
I was actually hoping Carl would answer it, but honestly, Dedike, you see, the thing about non-profit is it's non-profit. So the first thing is you have to look for patient capital. And again, you have to ask yourself in that what your goals or the problems you're trying to solve. Do we have the right people helping us solve those problems? So if we have a board that doesn't understand that your return is your return, like the job of a teacher, right? Your return is in heaven. There's no return. But I think it's also for nonprofits, it's about learning what others have done. Also, there are many initiatives globally that also want to test how things work in markets, and these are sort of like knowledge grants, because nobody knows, something might have worked in Southeast Asia, but again, we don't know how that's going to work in a Nigeria or something or the other. So how do we build a network, an ecosystem of partners that can support the funding, support the acquisition, to ensure that you can use that to almost as a seed grant to fund your project, and then you report on the impact. So it's about being clear with your theory of change. What's the impact going to be? How do we ensure that we're going to drive the digital aspects? And if you look around, a lot of the global tech companies have their foundations. So whether it's the Google Foundation, the Microsoft Foundation, the Stellar, the Nigeria just joined Hyperledger, Foundation the other day. So, and what they're trying to do is technology can't be for business and profitability alone. How do we ensure that we can make technology for good and technology for societal change? So it's about engaging, having conversations, and beginning to sort of tap into that market. And you might have to think about your own global vision and how does it align with what the different funding organizations are trying to do, and build those partnerships together. But there are opportunities to help you sort of leapfrog and spring into that space without spending your own money, because you don't, so that's the way I would look at it. It's more work. There might be some research component, some learning component, some TA component, but it's about just looking at where those opportunities are and tapping into them. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We still have tons of questions from our online guests, so I'll take one more and come back to the people in the room. One of the questions that we have here is really around how do we ensure the digital fitness of the board, especially when it comes to driving innovation, improving the quality of decisions, and right tone at the top. And this is coming from Amina Oyagbola. Carl, do you mind speaking to this?
My sister, Amina, the person who established our foundation. Pity she isn't here. Always a pleasure and joy to see her. Digital fitness of the board starts first and foremost with the selection of the board. The kind of people that you select on the board, their digital competence, their diversity, their background and experience. But that digital fitness is something that's always in transformation and in flux. So the question is, how do you ensure those competencies are always being honed and updated with current skills, information, and knowledge? So the board development program is critical. The subject matters that the board discusses is absolutely critical, and then physically taking them out of the traditional environment where they oversee and govern. Depending on the size of the company, if you're a small startup with $100,000, you can't do this, but if you're MTN, you can take your board to Silicon Valley to see what's happening there. We completed a strat session last month, early in September. We all went to Johannesburg for it. And probably half of the time of that strat session was listening to external speakers. External speakers that operate around our industry, and in some instances that don't operate what appears to be around our industry. So we had Boyi Olusoya, CEO of Flour Mills, to talk about how you navigate with the tightening customer wallet and inflation. We had the Senior Vice President of Intel, Saf Yeboah, who used to be McKinsey, speaking to us. We have BCG. So it's an active, continuous conversation, bringing in different perspectives. Formal, structured development training. So some of our board directors have gone to courses in Kellogg around how do you manage diversity and digital transformation in boards. But a lot of these, the boards, if you choose them right, they will be educating themselves regardless. But you keep putting those subject matters front and center at the formal board meetings.
All right, thank you. A quick contribution from our online audience. This is coming from Catherine Bakersted, and it's in relation to Nika's question, saying that there's also the possibility of exploring the willingness of techie millennials to give back, and that they are usually willing to help NGOs with digitalization as part of their give back to the society. So that's coming from Catherine Bakersted online. Do we have any other question from the room? Yes, okay. We have two, so.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Fumio Itunji. My question is going first to Inka as consultant and to Carl as executive, because one of the biggest problems on the board is the sheer investment, the sheer amount of investment into technology and the digital growth of the company. How would you advise board members to measure return on investment and to think before time what, the parameters to measure what will be a return on investment and the kind of investments that a company should make in thinking about its balance sheet and the business it does. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Yinka, I should take that just to acknowledge that Bukola Smith has asked the same question online, so we are taking both. So can we just...
So that's problem is a global problem which we call the productivity paradox. In other words, what's technology doing? Does it really add value in that sense? But I think, again, it's really about what do you want from technology and what measures can you put to it. So a good example is email, right? It might be a silly technology, but it's about you've invested in this. What are the costs or the expenses that you need to make disappear from your own expense sheet? So it might not be an addition to your top line. It might be eliminating something that you're already doing, but it's about being clear as to what is the change that this technology is bringing into your organization. And for me, it's about being very clear about measuring, because a lot of the time we don't have clear measures. So if I say I want to be more productive, what does that mean? Is it that I want to be able to send 20 emails a minute? Or is it that I want to be able to send 20 a day? So, but there needs to be that way of, as silly as it is, being able to count. In a global workflow, it's about what's the entire process of the workflow. So one question I would ask is, how long does it take to dispense 5,000 naira over the counter? Because the bottom line is that if I want that number, then I think about the last working day before Christmas. And that number is 2 minutes. I never meet that number on the last working day before Christmas because the supply and demand dynamics are totally different. So the productivity issue and the cost of technology versus the return is really about how we measure it. In terms of cost, unfortunately, when I talked about the total cost of ownership, what you're actually spending in your acquisitions is really 30% of the real cost. Because by the time you add all your human costs, implementation costs, there are many hidden costs. So it's an iceberg that you're not actually seeing. But then again, you have to now to ask yourself, what is the value return? And ask specifically, not just that, oh, when we get there, it will happen, but and if they give you 2 KPIs, take those and run with them rather than trying to look at everything that can go and then begin to say, what are the changes we need to make to ensure that we can get to these 2 KPIs? And that's what you monitor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll take one more question from the room, and I think that will be our final.
So,
Okay,
thank you. In 1 minute, the problem is a lot of technological evolution and digitization is measured in terms of cost savings instead of productivity because we don't know how to measure the productivity well. So the better you can figure out how to measure the productivity, the more you'll be able to justify these investments. I have never seen an ERP deployment, whatever it might be, LCP, Oracle, anything, that has been delivered on time, that they haven't extended the hypercare by 6 months, etc., etc., etc. Every single one. I know Mrs. Roche, who knows a few stories that we share in common, but it's not unique to any company. But the reality is, if you don't do them and you lived in the old way, there's a lot of productivity that you will lose. One other problem is that we often don't have the courage to dispense of, sounds harsh, dispense of resources that we have built into the system for the old way of doing work when we make the technological transition. So we keep carrying those costs going forward. Either you retrain those people and make them fit for purpose for different parts of the business, or you unfortunately will have to let them go, or you never see the productivity upside. But those are my 2 cents of wisdom. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you. My name is Susan Eroche. I'd like your advice or insights on this question, or not sure if it's a question or comment. A lot of companies have what they call a digital strategy. And my question is, should companies be having a digital strategy? Because my fear about that is they may just sort of jump on the bandwagon and do things because everybody else is doing them, not necessarily because that's the best way to digitalize because of the way they look at it? Or should they just basically have their corporate strategy and then look at digitalization as an enabler, sort of how to do the business and the best, as opposed to, oh, we must go digital, because what sometimes happens is they simply just computerize what is already a very bogus and long-winded process because they call that digitalization. It, to me, doesn't quite make sense. So what's your advice or insights on how best to, you're smiling, address this? Thank you.
I think you've already answered your own question. No, seriously, because I think that right now the business is digital. That's the way we need, like I said, have a digital first mindset. So your business is digital. So your business strategy must be about how does digital enable and how do I drive my business through digital? So it's fused. Before we used to say, oh, have your tech strategy, but right now we're fusing the two. So when you think about your business, every aspect of your business now should be thinking about the digital component. So that's why I say your business is digital. If you build it into your plan rather than building as a separate plan. So that's what you wanted to. My thing is that when I tell you your business is digital, so it's built in already. Thank you.
Carl, any final words on this question?
One of the words I hate the most in this world is strategy. It's usually what marketing people use when they can't justify the expenditure they want to make. But I simplify strategy into a choice of where you allocate resources. You look at your markets for next year and the opportunities that exist. Where can you grow the most? Where can you get the most margins? And you invest in those places. And a subset of that is your digital strategy. And it always has to come down to that question. I have limited resources. Where am I going to invest them to make the maximum impact? And if you approach it from that perspective, hopefully you might address the question around actually delivering true and expected value through IT solutions, ERP, digitization, etc., etc. You always have to answer the business question. You can't do digitization for the sake of digitization, even though it's inevitable in the world we live in. You must ensure the fundamental business question is answered. If, however, I was that smart, I would be Aliko Dangote and not an employee.
Sorry, but finally, it's also not procurement. So when they tell you, this is our digital, we're buying this, that's not a digital. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I'd known that Carl would go directly for my line of means of livelihood, I would have skipped him. But but I mean, generally, I think the perspective is like you rightly shared. At the end of the day, there's a business objective. There's an endpoint which could either be that you want to grow your business, you want to reach new customers, you want to reduce your cost, and then digital is only coming to enable that. So I'd like to thank the discussants. I think, okay. All right, so I'd like to thank the discussants. I think we need to bring it to a close here. I mean, this is not the end of the session. The next session we want to have is really just an experience share from EcoBank. So I'll be inviting Dr. Tomisin Fashino on stage to just come and give us some experiences from EcoBank with regards to their digital transformation journey. Thank you. All right, so can we get a mic for Dr. Tomisin? Yes. Yes, please.
Good morning, everybody.
And apologies, before you start, just to introduce Dr. Fashino properly, I think being conscious of that. So Dr. Fashino is the Group Executive Operations and Technology at EcoBank Transnational Incorporated. And his experience really has been in the area of both technology as well as financial services management. He's served in various leadership capacity across banks in Africa, Barclays, Citigroup, amongst others. So Dr. Fashionor, you'd spend the next 10 minutes just sharing the EcoBank experience with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to acknowledge the chairman of EcoBank Nigeria, Bola Adeshola. Also other directors here, Taba Peter Side, Mr. Ake Taba, Carol Oyedeji, my very good colleague, Titi Olujobi. I was about to say Titi Banwo, but I'll be sued. And I think Bimbola Wright is online. I'm a bit nervous, you know, when you stand in a room where you have Susan Eruche, you have Titi Olujobi, you have Bola Adeshola. It's like back in school when you're writing an exam and a lecturer is standing beside you. You have Remy Cole, all my former senior colleagues in Citibank. Very nice to see you all again. And Susan, I worked with you in UBA. You probably can't remember me. I was too junior. Anyway, in EcoBank, we launched out with a strategy in 2016 called Roadmap to Leadership. And just to answer Susan's question, it was not a digital strategy. It was a business strategy that had digital at the heart of it. And in 2015, we had hired Adeaye Yemi as our group CEO, and he put together a strategy that started in 2016 to launch a roadmap to leadership, a 5-year plan. And baked in that strategy was a digital strategy that said, we will digitize our customers, we will digitize ourselves, we will digitize our stakeholders. And at that time, he hired me, and I thought I was coming into a cushy job to come relax. After so many years of working in banking, it's time to now relax. But I got into the most exciting part of my career that has lasted the last 6 years. We had to define what is digital? How do we transform? What is the difference between digitalizing and digital transformation? Professor Ye has given a very eloquent explanation to that. And maybe someday when I retire, I'll come and look for a job to teach alongside with you. But to me, digital means that you just simply take what you are doing manually and you digitize it. Digital transformation sits in the space of innovation and how do we change what we are doing that delivers value. Where that value, somebody was asking questions about what are the KPIs to measure technology and digital. Where that value is quantifiable and can be measured because we have changed the way we do business. One of the things that was driving us then was that if you don't digitize by 2020, you may have no business. Somebody will take you out. And like Carl said, we didn't know the end state. We never know. And it becomes very difficult to communicate that to the board of directors. Because the director says that, so what is the end state? But we don't know. A lot of technology out there, a lot of things to digitize, a lot of things to change, but we don't know where it will end. And it becomes difficult to communicate that to the board. And that's why when it's a digital strategy, it becomes a problem. When it's a roadmap to leadership, a business plan, it becomes easier to sell. At that time, we had just below 1,300 branches. I'm speaking for EcoBank Group now, not Nigeria. We had about just below 1,300 branches. We had 19,000 employees. We had about 2,500 ATMs. We had about 70% of our transactions happening in the branches. And we decided to digitize. We tried to figure out that How do we move the transacting to the customer and not us? How do we digitize our customer interaction as first priority? Then how do we digitize the way we serve our customers so that we can serve our customers where they want to be served, how they want to be served, and at the price point that they can afford? One of the things that Professor was talking about here was at the price point. When you want to transfer money between Lagos and Accra, why should it cost you $30? Today we can do it for probably $5 or less. So we embarked on our digitization strategy and we introduced a mobile app, we introduced USSD. You know, when MTN and EcoBank, you know, banking and telco are on the same platform talking about USSD, can get emotive. But we also said we don't want to be dependent on the telcos, so let's ensure we have mobile app, let's ensure we have chatbot, let's ensure we have other means by which our customers can transact. And we deployed this, introduced it. In the case of EcoBank, we also had a challenge. We are present in 33 countries where we do banking, another 3 countries where we have business offices. And we didn't want people to go to the app store and see 33 apps, and they're trying to figure out that which of the 33 apps should I be choosing. So we decided to build one app that will work in 4 languages and across 33 countries. Working with my CEO, giving us that challenge sounded like, why don't you just fire me today? Why take me through the pain and fire me at the end of it? Because it seemed impossible, but we did it. We were able to go to the market with one app for 33 countries in 4 languages. And in a matter of a few years, and I'll tell you where the statistics are today. Today, across our group, 95% of our transactions are digital, meaning end-to-end delivered without any human interference. 95%. In Nigeria, it's 98%. We have been able to reduce from 1,300 branches to 600 branches. We have reduced from 19,000 employees to 13,000 employees. Carl kept talking about measuring productivity. The way we chose to measure our digital transformation was on how have we improved productivity? How have we improved the way we do business, and how are we serving our customers better? I'll give you a typical example, something as simple as call center. When we started out, our call center was 100%, hello, I have a problem. And we are set out to grow from 10 million customers at that time to 100 million customers. We are somewhere in between. I won't tell you in case you're my competition. And we could not grow our contact center at the same rate at which we want to grow our business. So we had to do it differently. We thought of digital. We introduced chat. And we realized that a lot of Carl's customers, they run out of airtime while waiting for me to serve them. So calling and holding on, you know, when you call the contact center and they say that you're number 20 on the queue, it was not exactly a nice feeling. So we got into chat. No sooner that we got into chat, we had to increase to 100, 200 employees just to respond to chat. Then we introduced chatbot using artificial intelligence that could scale infinitely and enable our customers to be served, and only those that the bot cannot serve needs to come to the bank. And that enabled us to change the perspective, change the type of service that we offer to the customer. We digitize ourselves. We introduce robotic process automation such that dead-end jobs, for those of us that grew up in operations in banking, you know, the reconciliation, ledger, account to ledger, ledger to account, and you're doing all those nice reconciliation. Speaking to Onyeka's earlier question, Madam, nice to see you again, of what do we do with people? We need to retrain them. We need to find newer ways of doing the same, of working, such that people are not doing dead-end jobs where you just do reconciliation. Today, we deployed robotic process automation and we've automated that such that nobody needs to do those type of job anymore. We just have a robot that does it 24/7 all the time and doing it a lot better. So what am I saying? In EcoBank, we took time to think through that how do we improve productivity, how do we deliver service to our customers where they want to be served and at the price point that they can afford. And that drove our digital strategy to digitize our customers, digitize ourselves, digitize our stakeholders, such that everything that we need to do, we have to think digital first. Before you come up with a business proposition that requires hiring 100 people, you need to tell us how can we do it digitally and solve the problem digitally and ensure that we get in efficiency, we get in good processes that we deliver all the time. And with our board, we continue to manage what needs to be measured. And since I'm talking to a lot of directors here, I think the board needs to be patient, a bit more patient with us in technology. We need the board to know that things do go wrong. That's why it's technology. Technology is good when it works, but when it doesn't work, something do go wrong. And we need the board to understand what to measure, the KPIs. If you want to measure on that, oh, did we save money? We didn't save money, but we grew the business by 300%. We are spending the same amount of money, but now we have $10 billion more in liabilities. We have 20 million more customers. We have 5,000 fewer staff. We have 600 fewer branches. We keep counting. That is what. Sorry. That is what counts from the executive to the board. So what counts is how have we brought in efficiency? How have we expanded the business? How have we delivered better to the customers? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much to Dr. Fashionner there. He has told the board members the way IT should be appraised. So thank you very much. I'm going to be handing over to Dr. Maima Bello-Sage, co-chair for WCD Nigeria. But I would just like to announce to the guest that breakfast is available just before we end. Make sure you stop by. So Dr. Maima, please. Dr. Maima is online, so she's going to be addressing us via the Zoom.
Good morning, everybody, all ladies and our gentlemen guests. Thank you all very much for attending. I'm going to start first by saying thank you to Mr. Carl Toriola. I understand he has to leave very shortly, so I don't want him not to know that we have been extremely grateful for his participation. That said, I will also apologize, first of all, that I'm not with you. I was actually going to say I should not be sorry because this means that I am part of the digital world. And since it is the topic for our discussion today, it's something that I think I should not be embarrassed about. Although I have many updates, well, a few important updates and a couple of housekeeping announcements, I do want to focus first on the thanks. As I said, Mr. Toriola is leaving, so I would like to make sure he knows that we have been very grateful for his participation. But I really think my first thanks should go to our host, to Bola Adeshola, our own Bola, and to EcoBank, who have so kindly hosted us on this occasion. Although I don't think Bola would expect anything less, I do want to let her know that her team has been amazing, very efficient, very responsive, and we're extremely grateful that they pulled this event off in the time that they had. I'd next like to thank Professor Inka David West. I have very much enjoyed hearing you. It's always wonderful when an academic can convey their thoughts so clearly. And I really do appreciate your clarity of discussion. Speaking for myself, it's always a relief and it's incredibly refreshing to understand that I'm not the only digital dinosaur out there. I too think better on paper, so I'm relieved to hear that even an expert like yourself still uses some paper, liquid or otherwise. I think that sorry, let me just add my thanks to moderator, Ladi Asuni. Thank you, Ladi. Having a terrible moderator is always a complete nightmare, and therefore we're extremely grateful for your expert handling of the session. It is always difficult when it's an area you know yourself, not to insert yourself into the discussion. You didn't do that, and we're very grateful that you allowed us to hear from others apart from yourself. Hopefully one day you will come and speak to all of us about your own digital transformation journey, and we may learn from you. But otherwise, we've benefited immensely from all the panel discussants. I think I should call them expert discussants. And we're extremely grateful for your time and for your participation. I think there are a couple of housekeeping updates that I should mention here. Bissy and I, as co-chairs, attended the Global Institute and Visionary Awards held in September in New York. As you all know, this is the big WCD event at which all the various chapters are present, and so we represented Nigeria. The theme of the event was Emerging Stronger, Achieving Growth Through People, Innovation, and Sustainability. I haven't checked, but I think that there may be sort of resources on the WCD app that are still available. So for anyone who wants to see what the discussions were, please do go and check that out. As a result of various conversations at the Global Institute meeting, we were invited to participate in the Boston chapter meeting, which was held jointly with the Boston chapter of the National Association of Corporate Directors in America. Bissy wasn't able to go, but I did attend. And I listened to a very interesting discussion on rethinking global strategy. I mentioned this in part because it was interesting to see the cooperation between those two organizations, which I think is a model that we should certainly build up on within Nigeria. Although we have begun discussions with Woodbiz, I don't think we've actually done anything together. So I think it's something we will be doing. But that discussion honed in on the disruptions to FMCG supply chains, and it, discussed all the risks that are created to these supply chains and to their companies as a result of a cybersecurity war, nationalism, climate change, environmental issues, and so on and so forth. And it struck me that this is something that we as a group haven't discussed. So if indeed any of you feel that this is something that your various companies might benefit from, I think it would be great for us to know. I take the opportunity to remind everybody that we do ask that you let us know if there are any issues that you do want us to discuss, so that we can pull in the expertise that is available through WCD, both local and international, and make the very, very best of that. We feel that that's what this organization can offer, and we would encourage you to please reach out and ensure that you make the most of what is available to you. Of more immediate interest, however, during the GI session, Bissy and I attended a presentation by the IFC. All of you obviously will know that the IFC is a private sector arm of the World Bank, and they invest on a commercial basis in many countries, in about 100 different countries, I believe it is. So several companies throughout these various jurisdictions, and they have an investment portfolio of about $12 billion. Typically, when they make these investments, they nominate directors to serve on the company boards. And obviously, this was something we felt we should pursue on behalf of the Nigeria chapter. So we were very pleased to discover that the IFC has great focus on emerging markets, and that they are very, very interested in expanding the pool of potential direct candidates. We mentioned that the Nigerian chapter could immediately provide a pool of experienced, board-ready, candidates that could meet all of their various requirements. And I'll just list the requirements so you know. But I will also just add very quickly that what we have done is ask that they have a session with us. It's likely to be an online session and then maybe followed by a physical networking session in Nigeria, because they have agreed that it may be something that they would want to do. But I think it provides a great opportunity for all of us to serve on international boards. So I would encourage all of us to take advantage of this opportunity. And I'll just mention quickly that the requirements, some of which obviously BC and I laughed at, were previous board experience, willingness to travel to developing countries. I found that one interesting. Financial literacy. You should be well versed in corporate governance. You should have a knowledge of ESG matters. You should have interpersonal skills and the ability to handle complex board relationships. You should have an ability to help improve board processes and decision making. You should have regional expertise in developing countries and specific industry or sector knowledge and understand the impact of new technologies. So this session was important. And we should also have additional expertise in handling material corporate changes, such as mergers and acquisitions and IPOs and etc. And I think that as a group, we have this expertise among us. So I certainly think we should take advantage of it and ensure that we are more widely spread across the continent, if not across the globe. So we will be updating you when we are in a position to do so, but we look forward to you all participating in the session. Finally, a request and a couple of reminders. We'd be grateful to have a host for our next session in December. So if your company is facing a particular challenge and it could form the basis of a discussion, we'd be very happy to accept an invitation from you to provide some expertise around that topic. As regards reminders, we'd love to have feedback on this session, please. If there's something we're doing right, we'd like to know. If there's something we're doing wrong, we'd also like we can improve what resources we provide to you. And secondly, we'd also like the names of fellow or other corporate directors who you believe may be eligible for WCD membership. Part of the value of this particular organization is not just the networks that it provides and the resources that it provides, but the possibility to expand those networks across the globe and the continent. With that, I will thank you all so very much. Bola, thank you very much again for hosting us. We really appreciate it. And please do stay well. Please do reach out and engage with us. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing you at our next session. God bless. Thanks all. And enjoy your breakfast. I wish I could be there.
But drop one last note as I'm going. I love the way Tomisin says he's moved to chatbots and apps so it gets away from MTN. All of those are running through MTN and someone's paying for the data.
Aha.
There's arrangement for lunch, so please let's stop for lunch.